So, politics, nearly back with us. I know a lot of listeners to Times Radio are, let's be honest, are they political anoraks? Is that yeah, they are a bit. Thank goodness we've got our political correspondent, Terry Stiasny, with us to talk about all this. Hello, Terry.
Hello, Jane.
The new figures today on the number of young people not in employment, education or training. Those figures were out today. And what is it? It's sort of good news-ish. Well, it's not as bad as it could have been.
Yes, the figures is 981,000 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who aren't in employment, education or training. I mean, that's around 13% of that age group, which is still high. But compared with the previous quarter of this year, it is starting to come down slightly, though it's higher than it was for the same period last year.
Do we know why the figure is marginally better?
Well, when you get these figures, they don't really give you reasons why, but you can look at other employment statistics and say that the employment rate in the country overall has also gone up a little bit in the last quarter. So generally, a higher proportion of people are in jobs. And some of the programmes that the government is proposing to try and bring these figures down haven't really started yet. So they are wanting to have things like jobs guarantees, which will be paid work experience for young people for around 6 months, but the pilots for that have only started in May of this year, so that is not something that would yet affect those figures.
OK, and that initiative, is that anything to do with Alan Milburn and his possible solutions and his interim report?
Well, Alan Milburn in his interim report set out what the problems were, but not really the solutions, and that is what we are expecting when he comes back with his final report over the next couple of months. But some of the issues that he thought were affecting the large numbers of people who weren't in employment education were things that included increasing mental health problems. People were often deemed to be unfit to work rather than trying to get back into or start off in work. He pointed out also that it's very hard for young people to get entry-level jobs. The sort of automated systems for applying for jobs make it quite hard. So this is why they're focusing a lot on work experience. And he also talked about structural issues, things like housing and transport and the other reasons that might make it get hard for people to get to work.
Right, I'm conscious, partly because we've been talking about this on the podcast this week, Off Air with Jane and Fee. Lots of concerned parents just emailing in saying, I feel so sorry for my children. I'm depressed. I think I'm depressing them. I'm telling them how hard it's going to be, whether they've got great A-levels or not. We shouldn't be too doom and gloom, should we? Because we're almost condemning an entire generation and just saying, oh, you're going to have it so hard. Oh, and we feel so sorry for you. It's just so grim.
I think it can be quite thankless, but I think, eventually a lot of people do get through there. But I think, you're saying about parents who are helping. I think one of the difficulties for people, if you are in that Neet category, perhaps, is that you might not have those kind of the parents that are able to tell you how to get a job. This is where you need to do this. The people you can talk to. So I think, it's partly about getting everybody access to the kind of training, even if you haven't got connections.
Right. Let's talk about the Middlesbrough area, because these stories this week about events there, 9 deaths, including a very young girl, 2 police officers. This stuff is just horrific. Yes,
it is really concerning. And the fact that there seem to be a series of incidents which police are looking into, which are possibly related, does seem to suggest that there is quite a big problem there. And obviously, both the police and local politicians and officials are trying to, work out how to stop this from escalating any further.
Right. We have had word today from the former mayor of Middlesbrough, a man called Andy Preston. Now, he said the town, I'm quoting him here, is on its knees, and he was really worried about retaliatory violence.
Yes, he says that he is very concerned about that. I mean, he's using, as you say, strong language here. He's talking about any further escalation, which he describes as, he said, it would be carnage. I think that's not the kind of language that's being echoed by some current politicians there. I mean, we've seen a joint statement from a lot of the local MPs who said that they've met the policing and crime minister. They say their communities deserve to feel safe, and they're saying these are pressures in the area that have built up over many many years. They would like to see people look again at the funding for the police and the fire services and try to get more resources. And now Andy Burnham has said he is going to help provide some support. And there's also meetings of social housing providers, councillors as well. So it's quite a lot of resource now going into trying to deal with the problems here.
And another big issue over the last couple of weeks has been the early release scheme. A lot of pressure here potentially for our still relatively new Prime Minister. What is likely to happen? We know 100 organisations have now signed a letter saying that the scheme directly contradicts Labour's pledge to attempt to halve violence against women and girls. So what's going to happen now?
Well, that's right. So Women's Aid are particularly concerned about the victims of domestic abuse, because they say that people should have at least 3 months' notice before the perpetrator is released. And they're concerned that if the early release scheme goes ahead, then there will not be enough time for people to know that their abuser might be being released. And they feel that there's a high risk of repeat offending, particularly with those kinds of crimes. And so we're expecting Alex Norris, the Justice Secretary, when Parliament comes back, to talk a bit more about what the government has actually decided to do, which categories of offenders will be eligible for early release. And I think that's going to be, a very interesting first day back in Westminster for him and for the Prime Minister, because this is something that affects so many people across the country, and I think a lot of MPs will be concerned about it.
Thank you very much. That's Terry Stiasny. We're going to stick with politics. Obviously, recess is over from next Tuesday. Everyone is back at Westminster. And to, put it mildly, he's got quite the in tray, the Prime Minister. I've been talking to Conservative peer and pollster Lord Hayward to get a picture of what he thinks in store for Mr Burnham. I asked him who he thinks has the most to prove when Westminster returns.
Oh, there's no question that Andy Burnham as Prime Minister will be under real scrutiny, not solely from the politicians in the chamber, but from all the journalists who have been seeking opportunities to put questions to him and to his ministerial team. And therefore, centre of attention, Andy Burnham, but how will Kemi Badenoch cope with a new Labour leader? How will the other opposition leaders get their questions in? What issues will they pursue? It's going to be a very interesting next few weeks.
Yes, I think it is. And PMQs, that the dynamic there is already quite intriguing to me. Perhaps I'm just a sado. Kemi Badenoch used to do rather well against Keir Starmer. How do you think she'll fare against Mr Burnham?
It's going to be a very difficult task, a very different task. And everybody will be judging her against, as you say, what has been her high level of performances. She's established a clear reputation across the country at large in terms of those performances. And people will be saying, has she done as well as? And it's going to be a difficult task for her. She has to bear in mind that this is in the way that any sports team who are playing a different sports team, even if they've had great victories in the last 2 or 3 weeks, you are playing a different team, in this case, a different individual. And therefore, you have to adapt your tactics to what are likely to be Andy Burnham's tactics.
How do you rate so far the performance of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister? He's been to Ukraine. Apart from that, he's been astride the national stage, hasn't he? Making little announcements here and there, nothing too substantial. People seem to quite like him, but this is where it really gets tough, isn't it, from now?
Oh, yes. There is no question. He's had a good few weeks. He's not been subject to questions, whether it be in Parliament or from the media particularly. He has handled the announcements incredibly well. One of the great advantages, and it's awful to say this, but it's true, is Andy Burnham is not Keir Starmer. He appears human. And therefore, he's handled things well. His intonation when it came to his comments about the tragedy in Middlesbrough with the 2 policemen, or his comments in Kyiv the other day, so different, and really conveyed a good feel for the public at large, a good message. And I think they have warmed to him, with the net result that there has been a Burnham bounce in opinion polls.
Yeah, how are Reform doing in the latest polling?
Reform are going down. They are the party that is most tied to their leader. if there weren't Nigel Farage, reform would be in a totally different league, much lower down. And Nigel Farage has had his own difficulties. Last August, 2025, he had a superb August. But this August, with the exception of Clacton, which went very well for him, with that exception, he has been missing from the media overwhelmingly because he knows that the question of the 5 million and Posh George and everything else will come up. So reform and Nigel Farage generally declining, not dramatically, but in steady decline.
And what's your thinking? Do you think there is going to have to be another by-election in Clacton?
Well, that's a decision for the Commissioner and the Committee of Standards. Nigel Farage says, it was just I failed to tick a box. But in fact, he's actually been criticised by the Commissioner previously for not declaring £400,000 of income on time. So this is a system he must be aware of. And it's very simplistic for him to comment on the way he has. But I think at the moment, it's in the hands of Commissioner. Then it will go to the Standards Committee. Whether there's another by-election or not, I'm not absolutely certain that there will be. But we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be quite a few weeks yet before we know.
Now, the budget awaits us in October, doesn't it? I think it's the third week, nearly the last week of October, the budget. But before that, there's been a lot of talk over the summer, understandably, about how grim really life looks for young people today. University graduates struggling to get into work, 1 million Neets, the figure slightly down today, but still a big, big number. Something has got to be done, hasn't it?
It's not just for young people, although you've identified where the biggest single problem is in terms of unemployment. The message from the opposition will be Andy Burnham, as I just said, has had his good weeks, but he's not been challenged to identify where the money is going to come from. So you've got problems with unemployment for young people and financial difficulties for others. We had the announcement about 4% increase in energy cap as of October the 1st. The words upcoming budget, we are going to hear over and over and over again from the opposition as both Andy Burnham and the Chancellor, John Healey, duck the issue until budget day of saying how much is going to be taken from whom and where.
So tax rises on the way. We all know that. And they probably know that we know that. So this is a ridiculous set of circumstances we're actually in, really, when you think about it.
There's no question about it. It's going to be almost, if I can use the expression, death by 1,000 cuts, which is probably inappropriate, but over the next 8 weeks, because you as journalists and as with politicians, there will be this recurrent observation about what is going to come in the budget. Don't let the government make any announcement without identifying where the money is going to come from. And that will be the message that every opposition politician will be pursuing, and every government minister will be trying to make announcements. A number of them will have to make statements in the House of Commons next week. They will be talking about events that have happened in the last few weeks, and associated with that, the questions of where is the money coming from will be that recurrent theme.
That is the Tory peer Robert Hayward, also a noted pollster as well.